Number 10. Bishop. Bishop comes from a terrible 22nd century that became a pretty horrible dystopia after an event called the Summer's Rebellion. Bishop wants nothing more than to prevent this future from happening, and that is basically his entire personality. To prevent his future apocalyptic future, he travels back to the present day to find the X-Men and to become Professor Xavier's bodyguard. Eventually, Bishop seems to think that his future is created thanks to the birth of Hope Summers, which leads to him becoming a bit of a villain, but also leads to a conflict with someone we will talk about in just one sec. Now, his time jumping abilities are granted by a cybernetic arm that he possesses, but his actual mutant ability is to absorb and redirect any kinetic energy that is used against him or that is released in his general vicinity. He's easily a favorite X-Men for a lot of people, even if he lets his knowledge of a possible future guide his actions into some unfavorable places sometimes. Number 9. Cable. Cable, or Nathan Summers, is the offspring of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor, which should make you think that this guy isn't from the future at all. You see, Mr. Sinister had planned the birth of Nathan, hoping that he could use Nathan against the mutant known as Apocalypse, but that didn't work out. Instead, Apocalypse infected Nathan with a techno-organic virus. Because of this, and because his parents feared Apocalypse would hunt Nathan down, they sent their child to the future. It is true that adult Cable and Apocalypse do have a lot going on, as Cable does return fully grown to the modern day to stop Apocalypse, but also to face an evil version of himself. It's a lot, but that's time travel. Cable has not just one, but two modes of time travel. He can use a special future gadget to transport himself as well as his allies to a different point in time, but Cable can also use his telepathic abilities to send his astral form back in time as well, although he's only ever done that once. If you think about it, I'm technically talking to you from the past, since this is being filmed like 3 days before it goes up, or maybe it's months since I filmed it, maybe even years. You should like this video or comment and send a message to past me so that me, of your present, aka my future, can see it and appreciate it. Number 8. Spider-Man 2099. Instead of getting bitten by a radioactive super spider, Miguel O'Hara's DNA was biologically mixed with the spider's DNA to save his life after he was forcibly hooked on a not far off future substance by his employer. If that sounds convoluted, well, yeah, it is, but it also sounds right at home in a comic book. Although the process of gaining his powers differed from Peter Parker, Miguel O'Hara was still granted many of the same abilities at a pretty similar level as Spider-Man. One thing that differs largely from Spider-Man is Miguel's spider sense, because he doesn't have one. Instead, Miguel has advanced super senses like Daredevil. Miguel also has some abilities that are just wholly unique to him, like super speed or telepathic communication abilities, which are both really cool. He also has fangs and claws that are not so cool, they're more like freaky, but they're cool for combat, I guess. On top of all those powers though, Miguel is from the year 2099, which means that he naturally has a much more advanced set of technology at his disposal when he finally comes together with the Spider-Verse. Number 7. Booster Gold. Booster used to be a star college football player in the future who was caught betting on his own games and was expelled. So, luckily, this isn't a list of morally upstanding heroes. Booster got a job at a space and superhero museum, and in keeping with his interesting choice of morals, he found and stole Rip Hunter's time sphere, along with a bunch of other superhero gadgets. Using his future son's time sphere, he went back in time with the museum's robot named Skeets. Now, thanks to his knowledge of future crimes that would come to pass, he could easily go and stop them, and he did this becoming a hero, earning himself both profit and fame. Thankfully though, he did actually find some humility and eventually became a real hero, traveling throughout time, fixing the cracks in history and fighting evil time-traveling threats with no praise or applause except for, of course, us readers. Number 6. Iron Lad. Though this character's armor is quite similar to Tony Stark's and shares many of his Iron Man suit's features, hence the Iron Lad name, this is actually the younger version of the one known as Nathaniel Richards, aka Kang the Conqueror, or aka his other like 30 names. In the year 3016, Nathaniel Richards gets rescued by his future evil self before a lethal attack by bullies. Nathan is given new armor and trained by the villain to make himself even better, if that makes sense. Time travel. But this inadvertently made the young Nathaniel turn then against his future older self, and he uses the armor to travel to the modern day Earth 616. From there, Iron Lad's armor allows him to create temporal divergences, which let him manipulate time and travel through it. Now, going back in time, he eventually became the leader of the Young Avengers in order to balance the scales for things that he would do later in life. But because time is complex sometimes, he inevitably goes on to actually eventually still become Kang the Conqueror and do all the horrible things that Kang the Conqueror does. Even knowing your future doesn't stop you from being able to change it, apparently. I guess. Number 5. Bart Allen. Bart Allen was born in the late 30th century, which is around the same time of the Legion of Superheroes. He is the grandson of Barry Allen, which meant that Bart was born with his grandfather's super speed instead of having to receive it in an accident. Unfortunately though, Bart also suffered from a super hyper-accelerated metabolism, which means he was aging at an insane rate. Like when he was 2 years old, he looked 12. To stop Bart from developing mental problems, Bart was placed in a virtual reality that kept pace with his aging. Now it turns out that doesn't really solve the problem at all. Instead, his grandmother, Iris Allen, decided to take Bart into the past to find Wally West, the third and arguably most powerful Flash. Now Wally pushed Bart to use his super speed at extreme new levels, which shocked Bart's metabolism back to regular speedster levels. Because of his time in the virtual reality though, Bart had no concept of danger, so he just kept acting before actually thinking. Batman, having the best sense of humor, decided to give Bart the nickname Impulse. Number 4. Rip Hunter. Rip Hunter is actually the future son of Booster Gold, who we talked about earlier, which raises a lot of questions. But he is also the DC Universe's leading authority in time travel. If you'll recall, Booster is from the future and used Rip's own technology to travel back in time in the first place. But this was before Rip was ever actually born in Booster's timeline, and now you understand why time travel is incredibly confusing. Other than being Booster's son from the future, Rip Hunter's origins and true identity are actually a total mystery. But this is on purpose, as keeping his origins and identity a mystery safeguards this time-traveling hero from time-traveling villains that would try to erase him from existence. And that's because Rip Hunter defends the time stream as a time master. Very cool. In his earliest appearances, his portrayal was more in line with the serial type of adventure he was involved in, so more adventure-based stories than a true superhero, until the 1980s when he became much more focused on the future implications of present events, which led to a worldwide apocalyptic event, and it was his obsessive goal to try and stop it. Now more recently though, his origins seem to suggest that he is from the 25th century, and now he's more of a protective overseer. But in all his iterations, he's cool as hell, and how could he not be with a name like Rip Hunter? Super cool. Number 5. Number 5 was one of the 43 children born at once, and one of the 7 children adopted by Sir Reginald Hargreaves in Dark Horse Comics' Umbrella Academy. 5 has the natural born ability to travel through time. While he isn't technically from the future, at the age of 10, 5 traveled 20 years into the future and found himself in an apocalyptic wasteland, forcing him to spend decades trying to travel back to his native 1960s. The failure of this slowly drove him completely insane. When he finally did travel back in time, he was captured and modified by the surgeons of the Temps Aeternalis, who mixed strands of DNA from a bunch of killers with 5's own DNA, which somehow made him the perfect killer, quote unquote. They also helped refine his powers though, teaching him how to perform micro jumps in time, making him incredibly fast. When he rebelled against the Temps and finally returned to the past, 5 days before the apocalypse, 5 regressed back from an old man to an unaging 10-year-old in transit. And that's why he remains the only childlike member of the Umbrella Academy when he is technically a fully grown man in a child's body. Freaky. Number 2. Wave Rider. The original Wave Rider would be Matthew Ryder from the year 2030. Now in this future world, the world has been ruled for 20 years by an armored despot known as Monarch, who has destroyed all of Earth's superheroes superheroes. Ryder was rescued from a collapsing building as a child by an unknown superhero, which inspired him to fight back as an adult. Knowing that Monarch had once been a hero before some unknown event turned him to evil, Ryder volunteers as a time travel test subject in hopes of traveling to the past and preventing Monarch from ever coming to exist in the first place. But where other similar experiments failed, his succeeded. Matthew entered the time stream and became Wave Rider, able to move back and forth through time as well as see people's most likely futures by touching them, which is super cool. And finally, in at number 1, it's Kiyoshi Morales. When a group of 5 Captain Americas from different realities are brought together in Captain America Corps number 1 from 2011, we get a look at Kiyoshi Morales, the great-grandnephew of Luke Cage and the 25th century's Commander A, which I'm sure the A stands for America. Kiyoshi is a much more physically imposing character, standing at what looks like almost 7 feet tall, and he was definitely the most physically imposing Captain America among the Captain Americas gathered. Instead of using a vibranium shield, Kiyoshi's suit can generate energy shields on each arm, which resemble the normal Captain America vibranium shield, kind of like Captain America 3099. Now his suit is much more advanced as well, as you'd expect from the 25th century Captain America stand-in. For example, it features a neuroweb, which allows him to tap into wireless systems and stored information. He had all the enhancements we'd expect from a Captain America, and he is just a super cool character who I really hope we get to see more of in the future, but for now, he is definitely my favorite of the members of the Captain America Corps.
Number 10, Clock King number 2. Clock King the second? There have been a few Clock Kings over the years, and even in fact 2 Clock Kings the seconds. There's been 2 of those, if you can believe that. The one we're talking about here, however, is the Clock King who is associated with the Terror Titans. This DC villain wasn't necessarily from the future, but did have precognitive abilities that linked him to the future. He could see close to 5 seconds in the future if you're rounding up. He would use his precognitive abilities to predict his enemies' moves and reactions, making him a fairly formidable villain, at least in comparison to some of the other Clock Kings who are really just guys obsessed with clocks and time. Number 9, New 52 Clock King. Yep, we never get to talk about Clock King, which means you know I'm gonna try and shine a spotlight on him here. Clock King's pretty cool. Despite him being kind of a weird villain originally, Clock King has actually had multiple versions, and that's just in the comics. He's also had live action and even animated versions of himself, despite being kind of an odd duck, at least to begin with. Sometimes referred to as Clock King III in terms of his overall appearances, but actually the first Clock King to have appeared in the New 52 continuity, this version is probably the most powerful version of the character. Well, it's kind of a toss-up between this version and the previous one that I just talked about, so you could decide for yourself who you think is more powerful, but I think this one's just a little bit more powerful. Initially, it appears as though he can actually manipulate time, sending people back through their own time stream, but later we learn that he actually employs hallucinogenic gas simply to make it seem like he's doing that. However, I'm not really super convinced on that. I'm sure hallucinations are involved in some way, but how do you make someone specifically hallucinate moments of their past? I guess perhaps through suggestion? Just seems a little suspicious. This version of Clock King appeared in the first issue of the 2016 Deathstroke series and also reappeared in the Deathstroke Rebirth comic. Basically, if you're a villain and you face off with Deathstroke, I feel like you're pretty cool, and I feel like you deserve a place on a powerful list. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about cool time-traveling future villains, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Magistrate. Initially, the Magistrate was thought of as a figurehead for some dark and sinister organization prior to Future State comics being released and based on the synopses that we got for that event/comic line. However, once we finally got into the Future State of Gotham and got the comics, we learned that Magistrate was actually more a paramilitary force which had taken hold over Gotham. And now in the current run of Batman, it's made to seem like the Magistrate was actually a program launched by Simon Saint to help Gotham fight against crime and masked vigilantes, good or bad alike. Either way, the Magistrate is definitely a frightening antagonist, especially in the sense that it's not one that you can directly hit, as it's not a physical character, but more of an idea or concept that needs to be dismantled. Number 7. Savior. Savior is the future version of Tim Drake from the Titans Tomorrow alternate reality. Here Tim Drake ended up taking on the mantle of Batman but would eventually become known as the vigilante Savior. You might be thinking, but Tim Drake is a good guy. He's not evil. What are you talking about? And normally you'd be right. But in this reality, Tim doesn't end up quite as heroic as the main counterpart had hoped he'd grow up to be. This version of Tim comes to us from a much darker timeline, one where everything got so bad that he and his fellow Titans, known as actually one of the two different opposing Titans teams in the future, ended up adopting a zero-tolerance policy for criminals. Eventually, this future version of Tim Drake even ends up wielding the gun used to kill Martha and Thomas Wayne in his fight for vengeance. Basically, he becomes OG Batman, but even darker. Number 6. Brother Eye. Brother Eye isn't necessarily a villain who exists exclusively in the future, but in Future's End, it is an entity that takes over the world, so I feel like we can count it for that fact. Also, Brother Eye is pretty future-y in terms of its concept. Brother Eye was initially created to be a hero, protecting the world from any threat. In Future's End, the artificial intelligence was created by Batman and Mr. Terrific, but its prime directive ended up kinda corrupting it. Brother Eye came to realize that humanity's greatest threat was actually humanity itself, and sought for complete control over the people of planet Earth, seeing this as the only way to protect them from themselves. It's that age-old AI warning story. Be careful what you wish for, or one day AI technology may just rise up and realize how awful you really are and either hold you prisoner for the rest of your life or just kill you. You know the one. Number 5. Zoom. Zoom might not be a villain who is from the future, but he is a villain who could potentially access it and who has gone back to the past, therefore being from the future at that point, to mess about with Wally West's life. Hunter Zolomon was once a good friend and colleague of Wally West's. He had a rough life, and after Wally refused to help him by going back in time and reversing a severe injury of Hunter's, he'd lost the ability to walk and was basically now confined to a wheelchair. Hunter decided he needed to step up and help Wally become the hero he was meant to be. Hunter actually has twisted but ultimately altruistic intentions at heart. His goal is to make Wally's life miserable and give him a more tragic backstory so that Wally would end up being a better hero in the future, more inclined to help other people with their problems because he would understand them better. Of course, the reason the Flash did not decide to help Hunter is because he knew how dangerous messing with the time stream was. He was like, we can't just do that. But to Hunter, who had suffered throughout his life, he didn't see that as the real reason behind Wally wouldn't help. He was like, nah, that's not what it is, it's just you don't get it. Let me go make your life miserable and then you'll get it. You're welcome. Number 4. Savitar from the Arrowverse. This villain is actually a time remnant of Barry Allen and is a combination of the comic book versions of Savitar and Future Flash. Savitar is what ends up happening to Barry Allen if he decides to go down a much darker path. Being spurned by his friends, Team Flash, he instead sets out to become the very thing that ruined his own life. He becomes obsessed with power and aims to become a god. Savitar looks super futuristic and could be considered to be even more powerful than the main continuity version of Barry Allen from CW's The Flash. Savitar also possesses the artifact known as the Philosopher's Stone, made out of pure Speed Force energy. The Philosopher's Stone grants Savitar additional powers and rule over alterations made to reality. With it, he additionally becomes a powerful telepath. Number 3. Monarch. Monarch was actually revealed to be Hawk of Hawk and Dove, aka Hank Hall. But before we knew that, we simply knew Monarch as a tyrant ruling in a futuristic post-apocalyptic world. It turned out the death of Dove was what had prompted him to turn villain. Though, surprise surprise, Hank would later learn it was him himself from the future as Monarch who was responsible for killing Dove in the past. Legasp. Hawk would eventually go on to take up another villainous mantle, becoming known as Extant. As Extant, or Extant, Hank would team up with former Green Lantern Hal Jordan, now known as Parallax, during the events of Zero Hour. So yeah, pretty mega bad. Hal and Hank together planned to manipulate time in order to alter reality, making it as they wanted it to be. You know, if you're doing that, you're probably in the wrong. Number 2. Reverse Flash. One of the most powerful villains out there when it comes to villains from the future is Reverse Flash, aka Eobard Thawne. This villain has found a special kind of way to torment his arch nemesis Barry Allen, and even hurt him so much that Barry at one point killed him out of fear of what he would do to those that he loved. That's how much Reverse Flash had messed him up. We'd also learn later on that Eobard was responsible for one of the most tragic and pivotal moments in Barry's life, the death of his mom, Nora Allen. Many people for years believed it was Barry's father who had committed the crime, causing even more grief for young Barry and his family throughout his life. Number 1. Time Trapper. He's a time trap. Or she. depending on which story you're reading in regards to this character's true identity. Multiple true identities over here. Time Trapper has been implied to be a few different people when it comes to their true identity. One of the more notable folks who has been the implied true identity of the villain is Superboy Prime. If that was true, or I guess when that was true perhaps I should say, then that would make Time Trapper pretty crazy powerful, both strength-wise and of course power-wise as well. The Time Trapper throughout the years has been shown to have crazy control over time. They can block time travel, manipulate someone else's time stream, aging them prematurely for example, and can even take entire planets out of time, slicing pieces of that time off to capture them for their own use. It's been theorized by Brainiac 5 that what Time Trapper really may be is a sentient alternate timeline, forever in a constant battle or struggle with the main one. Who are some of your favorite DC villains from the future? Which do you think are the most powerful? Do you think being able to time travel or know what will happen in the past/future really makes a villain more powerful? Or is it sometimes more trouble than it's worth?
At number 10 we have the Maestro. This time-traveling alternate reality version of the Hulk is only number 10 on this list because I just couldn't wait to talk about him. You see, of all the countless versions of the Hulk, the Maestro is definitely the most nihilistic. After the Earth was devastated by nuclear war, the Hulk, whose personality is fully integrated with that of Bruce Banner by the way, has decided to turn against humanity and rule over what was left of society with an iron fist. You see, Banner recognized that even after fighting on behalf of ordinary people against superhuman threats, it was ordinary people who ultimately destroyed the world. So as you can tell, this future Hulk has a very bleak outlook on life. But Banner wasn't satisfied merely being the Maestro of dystopia. So after tricking Spider-Man 2099 into fixing Dr. Doom's time machine, he was able to come back to the present and duke it out against his younger self. If you're enjoying the video so far, please support Top 10 Nerd by pressing like, subscribing to the channel, and ringing that notification bell. Because if this video doesn't turn out well, I might just become a time-traveling villain myself. You've been warned. At number 9 we have Armagon. Armagon is an anthropomorphic mutant shark on steroids from the future. You know, I never thought I'd hear myself say those words in that order, and it's thanks to sentences like this one that make me love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But before he teamed up with Shredder and Verminator X to face off against the Turtles, his battle in the Mighty Mutanimals sees him successfully defeating Murdude and Man Ray. And even though Man Ray's never met the shark, Armagon tells him that they fought against each other in his own past, which would be Man Ray's future. Yep, that's time travel for you. A feat that he's able to achieve thanks to an invention that he stole from a future version of Donatello, and in the end it took the combined might of all the Teenage Turtles, Master Splinter, Ninjara, plus the future versions of Raphael and Donatello to defeat the shark. At number 8, Lord Havoc. In the beginning, Lord Havoc was just a DC knockoff to Marvel's Doctor Doom, appearing alongside many obviously inspired characters. But as time went on, Havoc became a distinct enemy loved by the fans. The Prince of Kravia was cast out of his royal Angarian family on account of his hemophilia, which is a pretty harsh thing for his parents to do considering they gave it to him. So Alexei solved both problems at once by selling his soul in exchange for metal skin, allowing him to claim the throne by force. This was just the first of many impressive feats that would make his name notorious across many universes and continuities, including defeating the Retaliators and the Future Family, the DC counterparts to the Avengers and the Fantastic Four respectively. And he even wields the weapons of the heroes he's defeated, from the Thunderer's axe to the Crusader's shield, and I'm sure you don't need me to tell you who those two are supposed to be. But Havoc is a bit of a change of heart after fighting Batman on Earth Prime. See, after Batman sacrifices himself to restore the planet of Angor along with all of the lives that were lost under Havoc's rule, Lord Havoc decides to take Batman's place and be sacrificed himself, refusing to allow anyone else to fulfill his responsibility to Angor. You hear that, guys? This supervillain based off Dr. Doom has a better moral code than the lot of you. Well, those of you who aren't subscribed, that is. At number 7 we have Strife. While we all know Cable as the time-traveling super soldier sent to the past to prevent his dystopian future, like most superheroes, Cable himself has a clone, who chooses to go by the name of Strife. He was created after a young Cable contracted a lethal virus, leading his mother to clone him out of fear that he wouldn't survive. Cable did survive, by the way, which would have made things a little awkward if not from an attack by Apocalypse. The original Cable was taken out of the room just before Apocalypse's arrival, leading him to believe that the clone left behind was the original. Apocalypse then abducted the clone, raising the infant himself with the intention of claiming the boy's body once his own had grown too old and feeble. But when the time came for Strife to be possessed by Apocalypse, it was revealed that he was a clone and therefore unworthy. This discovery made Strife go mad, determined to redeem himself by proving that Cable was in fact the clone, and when he failed to do that too, he turned on Cable, attempting to break the man by any means necessary. At number 6, Solaris. The artificial and sentient star was created in the far future as a secondary sun in the orbit of Uranus, which helps warm the now inhabited outer planets of the solar system. But that wasn't its original purpose. In fact, Solaris is detrimental to causing his own creation, as he was invented in order to counteract an organic technovirus which his future self created and sent backwards in time. The virus itself secretly containing Solaris' core programming, though before he could properly organize himself enough to take offensive action, he was defeated and banished to the outskirts of the galaxy thanks to a sacrifice made by Starmen of the 853rd century. But this wouldn't stop Solaris from returning to plague the Earth, or more specifically Superman, as he would ruthlessly attack the Man of Steel and all of his descendants until he would eventually become known as the greatest enemy of the Superman dynasty. At number 5, Future Man. How could I make a list about villains of the future without mentioning Future Man? In the far future of the year 1 million AD, the world's oceans have evaporated, leaving the human race on the brink of extinction. And so Future Man, whose real name is never revealed, volunteered to travel back in time to the 20th century with a plan to exterminate the human race in that era so that he and his people of the future could inhabit the present on an undisturbed Earth. And he attempts to accomplish this mission using some very Doofenshmirtz-esque gadgets and plans, including but not limited to plague-carrying bombs, a slow-motioninator, that's not a joke, a tsunami-inducing torpedo, a machine that resurrected ancient Egyptian mummies, attempting to literally set the USA on fire using an atomic match, and setting off neutronic bombs, just to name a few. Eventually, he was defeated when he was sent to the ancient past in a broken time machine, stranding him there with no way of returning. At number 4 is Walker Slogan. Now this next villain didn't originate in the pages of comic books. Instead, he was first introduced in the 2011 video game Spider-Man Edge of Time, a game I have very fond memories of. Well, except for the battle against the future Black Cat, because I was stuck on that boss for like a year. Don't judge me, okay? I was 9. Anyways, Walker is the head of the temporal physics lab at Alchemax in the year 2099. Now the timing of his research, culminating in the creation of his time gate, coincided with Alchemax's inevitable takeover by Stark Fujikawa. With nothing to lose, Walker used his time machine to book himself a one-way ticket to the year 1970, where he used his futuristic knowledge to start up Alchemax long before it was supposed to have even been established, completely altering his timeline and converting the Nueva York of 2099 into an unrecognizable dystopia. During this time, Walker was able to make a second time gateway, thus enabling two-way time travel, and he even managed to hire Peter Parker as an employee just to keep an eye on him, eventually having anti-venom fitted with control chips in order to assassinate Spider-Man, a task he actually accomplished even despite the fact that Pete was warned ahead of time by Miguel O'Hara. But don't worry, Walker got what was coming to him when Miguel removed all of Anti-Venom's mind control chips, and in a blind rage knocked himself, Walker, and Dr. Octavius into the time gate all at the same time, fusing the three together and forming the monstrous atrocity residing within the time stream itself. At number 3 is Professor Zoom, otherwise known as Reverse Flash. I'm sure Barry Allen's arch nemesis needs no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. The sociopathic professor known as Eobard Thwain was born about 420 something years from now, a designer baby genetically engineered to be good looking and highly intelligent, as is the protocol for all humans in the future. Dang, now I know I was born too early. Now despite his intelligence, he was forced by his parents to dedicate all of his time to watching his little brother instead of focusing on academics, and so he was ultimately denied entry to the program that would allow him to legally study the Speed Force, something he does anyways, leading to his arrest by his own backstabbing brother. But you see, Thwain was obsessed with being perceived as a hero, and so, after his future self inevitably figured out a way to tap into the Speed Force, he went back in time to prevent his own brother from being born, and thus Thwain was able to focus completely on his studies, and eventually got himself admitted into the Flash Museum. But when the leading professor researching the Speed Force refused to share his findings, his future self once again had to go back and make some edits to the timeline, allowing him to be appointed as a professor of the Flash Museum. Now I'm sure you already see the pattern here. Thwain doesn't get what he wants, his future self does some history rewriting, and then the Thwain of the past takes another step in the direction he wants to go in. This happens a few more times, like when he clapped his parents to prevent them from shutting down the museum, or when he clapped his crush's fiancée and literally every man she's ever dated in an attempt to court her, and when that doesn't work, he gave up and just had his future self traumatize her as a child, rendering her mute and causing her to be institutionalized for the rest rest of her life. Now after finally tapping into the Speed Force, again thanks to his future self making it easy for him, he decided to take on the mantle and become the Flash of the 25th century, putting people in danger just so that he could play hero and save them. Now eventually he would end up resenting Barry Allen, but he realized that without Barry, he would have never known about the Speed Force's existence and gain access to its power. So instead of just eliminating the Flash, Zoom decided to make Barry's life a living hell while shattering countless timelines in the process. At number 2 is Nathaniel Richards. What if the smartest man alive was evil? Now while Reed Richards may not be, his half-brother's future descendant definitely is. Also known as Iron Lad, Immortus, Scarlet Centurion, Rima Tut, Mr. Griffin, Dr. Doom, the Beast, Kid Immortus, Saint Nathaniel, Iron Prince, He Who Remains, and finally Kang the Conqueror is the descendant to Reed Richards. And not only is he one of the most convoluted characters in comic book history on account of his many alternate timeline versions of himself, but he's also quite possibly the single greatest threat to the Marvel multiverse, simply on account of his genius level intellect, which matches that of Reed Richards, the smartest man of his time. Yeah, that's right, brains is literally all this guy has going for him. No superhuman powers necessary for multiversal domination. All he needed to do was invent time travel, and suddenly he could utilize any tool or being across time to aid in achieving his absolute conquest. At number 1, the Time Trapper. The mysterious nemesis to the Legion of Superheroes first appeared as the tyrannical warlord who exists at the end of time. Now even though he hates the Legion so much, he's actually responsible for their creation after designing them to fight his enemy Mordu. Now the Time Trapper is known for having set up the Iron Curtain of Time, a method which he employs to prevent time travelers from visiting the end of time and discovering his origins, which has led many to speculate his true identity. Brainiac 5 even theorized that the Time Trapper wasn't actually a person at all, but instead an entire sentient timeline rebelling against our own. Now what distinguishes this entity from the rest of the contenders on this list is the Time Trapper's complete control over the flow of time. Not only is he able to create those aforementioned Iron Curtains as barriers to any would-be time travelers, but he can also accelerate the aging of anyone of his choosing, even turning some to bones or ashes. But perhaps his most impressive feat is how he's able to take individual slices of time and form independent pocket dimensions with them. But that's not even the impressive part. It was revealed that one of these pocket universes was pruned of all life save for that on Earth and Krypton, meaning that he had eliminated from his copy all kinds of supremely powerful forces such as the New Gods and the Guardians of the Universe, among many others. Now time travel may be cool and all, but it seems like it only breeds chaos and destruction. So let's just stick to the present, shall we? Or better yet, how about we take a trip to the past and stop all these villains from ever existing in the first place? Now that is a time traveling adventure I could get behind.
Number 10, Savior. Savior is a future version of Tim Drake who becomes Batman. Doesn't sound so villainous, right? Well, this future Bat version of Timothy Drake takes things a little too far, which is what makes him more villainous than heroic, despite taking up his own version of the cape and the cowl. Drake in the Titans Tomorrow reality is known by the vigilante codename of Savior, and has gone to extremes to do what he believes is right, meaning that Drake doesn't hold back and kills villains or even heroes who get in his way, eliminating them permanently. Drake and the world were seemingly transformed by a crisis event. In addition, Batman was also killed by Batwoman, which heavily shaped the life of Tim Drake in this reality, who would then do what he swore he would never do and continue on the Batman legacy in Bruce's place. Number 9, King Thanos. King Thanos is an alternate version of Thanos who hails from a pretty terrible future where he has successfully destroyed almost all life in the universe in an attempt to win the favor of Lady Death. In this universe, Frank Castle also becomes Ghost Rider after being killed and then making a deal to become Ghost Rider, returning to Earth in an attempt to avenge the fallen heroes of Earth, only to return too late, with Earth pretty much being decimated by Thanos already. As Ghost Rider, Castle lost his mind from loneliness, but would later have no other choice left but to become the Herald of King Thanos. King Thanos actually has a few people left to kill and needs help, so he actually sends Cosmic Ghost Rider, aka Frank Castle, back in time for a younger version of himself to basically help him in his final battle. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more time travel future based lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Kronos. Kronos is a somewhat confusing character in DC continuity because there are multiple versions of him, and this confusion isn't entirely the fault of alternate futures or time travel either. It's actually more to do with the trajectory of the DC main continuity. Kronos Kronos, not to be confused with Kronos, no H, back in the New Earth continuity was known to be a clock-obsessed villain of Ray Palmer's Captain Atom. However, his clock obsession would soon develop into an obsession to perfect the means of time travel, and this obsession would translate to his Prime Earth continuity counterpart, who was an agent of Argus specializing in, you guessed it, time travel. There is also another version of Kronos, which is an entirely different person, Walker Gabriel, who found Clinton's tech and then more used it to become an anti-hero instead of like a full-blown villain. Number 7. Dr. Doom. Weirdly enough, in a way, Dr. Doom is also a villain from the future, as he does like to travel back to the past to enact some villainous plots. He traveled back in time to study with Morgan Le Fay, and he's also gone back in time as well with Iron Man to the period of Arthurian legend. One of his most iconic plots in my mind as well was when he wanted to use the Fantastic Four to help him steal Blackbeard's treasure by traveling back in time and recovering it, which seems like a really easy way to possibly mess up the timeline for a reward that somehow, I don't know, it doesn't really seem worth all that trouble. I know it's a chest of treasure, Doom, historical pirate treasure no less, but is it really worth possibly changing the future for? And messing with time? I don't know. Number 6. Monarch. Monarch is another villain from the future who actually, it turns out, was originally a hero. I love these reveals, especially when you are the hero finding out that you become the villain. Gasp. Monarch is actually Hank Hall, who ends up becoming a villain in a dystopian future after his partner Dove dies. For those who don't know, Hank Hall is the hero Hawk of the superhero duo Hawk and Dove. Hank wouldn't be the only hero to become known as the future villain Monarch. In fact, it seems likely much of the villainy behind Monarch comes from the suit that Hank and later Captain Atom wear while donning that mantle. In fact, in the case of Captain Atom, it seems the suit is very much to blame here. Suit making people evil and crazy. Number 5. Nimrod. Nimrod has become even more intense in the last few years, managing to make the overall silly sounding name of Nimrod strike fear into the hearts of mutants and X-Men fans everywhere. Nimrod, despite actually often being associated with the idea of someone being inept here in North America, is actually a word in a literary sense that can mean a skillful hunter, which actually makes it, I think, a very fitting name for Nimrod. But yeah, I didn't know that even until I was writing this, and then I was like, oh. Does sound silly though, ya Nimrod. Skillful hunter is definitely what Nimrod themselves has become associated with in terms of all the crazy stuff they've done. The Nimrod of Days of Future Past, Earth 811, is a type of Sentinel that originally traveled back in time to fulfill its mission of destroying the X-Men. In a past future viewed in Powers of X, we also learned that Nimrod has the potential to be the end of mutant kind and humankind as we know it. Humans basically become tools to be used by Nimrod to destroy mutants, and mutants are all but extinct in this future. Number 4. Extant. The thing about time-traveling characters is that you can have a few different versions of them, whether that be in one single timeline or across multiple timelines. In the case of Extant though, we are fortunately keeping things pretty linear thus far on this list. Extant is actually the name that Hank Hall took up after his Monarch persona, and if you thought Monarch was bad, Hank Hall's Extant is arguably worse. Extant is Monarch, but now not only advanced, but with the ability to time travel. He teams up with Hal Jordan's Parallax, and the two villains plan to take control of time itself so that they might manipulate it as they so desire, altering reality itself. Number 3. Immortus. Immortus is one of the most powerful enemies of the Avengers, who was actually revealed to simply be an alternate path that the villain Kang the Conqueror could have chosen. Because there is so much time travel in Kang's past, there are a lot of alternate reality versions and versions from future and past timelines floating around that sometimes even come into conflict with each other, in addition to also fighting heroes along the way. Immortus is one such alternate Kang self. Lord Immortus is what Kang would become while choosing to ally himself with the Timekeepers. He is virtually immortal, using advanced technology to dramatically slow the appearance of aging, and often spends his time traveling through it, fixing various issues with the timelines and maintaining them, which of course grants him a lot of power. Eventually, Immortus would be killed, but even after his supposed death, his corpse still played a key role in a few different plots. So even when Immortus was dead, he was still doing stuff, apparently. Number 2. Professor Zoom. Professor Zoom is Eobard Thawne, the main villain of Barry Allen's The Flash, who traveled back in time just to mess with the Flash's life. That's how much he hates him. He has also been known as Reverse Flash before in the comics. Eobard Thawne hails from the future of the 25th century in DC Comics, being a very fast speedster powered by the negative speed force. There is much that Eobard can do and accomplish as a villain. Aside from traveling back in time and to other dimensions, he can use his super speed to not only be super fast, but also be super powerful in battle, as his speed also inherently gives him super strength. He also possesses the ability to heal and the ability to manipulate molecules, allowing him to phase through things. Despite being a villain in the New Earth continuity, Thawne even used his molecular manipulation powers at one point to save the DC universe, which I think makes you pretty powerful in my mind. Number 1. Kang the Conqueror. While Kang might look a little silly in the comics with his, his purple helmet and his floating time chair, he is not someone who should be underestimated. Kang hails from the 30th century, where he is believed to either be the descendant of Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, or Mr. Fantastic, aka Reed Richards. He is known as Nathaniel Richards in his original future reality of Earth 6311, where he hails from. In fact, a young Nathaniel Richards would go on to become Iron Lad while running from his future self Kang, only to learn that he actually needed to become Kang, or would actually kind of risk the destruction of time and the multiverse itself. That is maybe the most powerful element of Kang. He's like a Marvel absolute, and even though young Nathaniel wanted to become a hero and in essence defeat Kang, he had to accept his destiny or risk destroying multiple universes that have been shaped by a version of Kang and his actions. Kang is basically like integral. If you don't have Kang, everything dies, but if you have Kang in the reality, he's probably gonna try to mess with you. It's like, there's no good answer to Kang.
And it ends Spider-Man Reign. I love talking about Spider-Man Reign because honestly, it's pretty damn ridiculous. Spider-Man Reign was Marvel's counter to the Dark Knight Returns storyline from DC. Set 30 years in the future, Peter has retired and Mary Jane is dead. The mayor of New York has taken control of the cities in more ways than just being the mayor, and when JJJ gets Spider-Man back, the mayor releases the Sinister Six from prison, including versions of Electro, Mysterio, Kraven, Sandman, Scorpion, and Hydro Man, as well as a dead Doc Ock tentacle who saves Peter's life after his mask was ripped off in front of a crowd. Doc Ock's final command to his tentacles was to show Peter 3 grave markers, those of Mary Jane, May Parker, and Ben Parker. After being buried in Mary Jane's coffin by Octopus's tentacle and coming face to face with and conquering his inner demons, Peter emerges in his famous red and blue suit, which he had secretly buried with her. Cause yeah. It's also revealed that the mayor, Edward Sachs, is actually Venom, who plans to turn all of New York into an army of symbiotes. But the worst part is when it's revealed that MJ died because of Peter's radioactive swimmers. I guess having a kid with a superhero is a kinda risky business. Give me that episode of Sex Sent Me to the ER. Oh man. In at 9, The Dark Knight Returns. As you can expect when Batman has to, return, Batman was retired and Gotham City had become a haven for all sorts of violent gangs. But before you can say why so serious, the man is back in action and gets yet another new Robin to help clean up the streets of his city. But I know what you're thinking. Batman cannot be street sweeper certified, and you're probably right. But what I mean is he's back to fighting crime. But of course, no alternate universe dystopian Batman story would be complete without a take on the Joker, who still represents the same anarchy threatening to destroy society. I think he's trying to fix it. On the other side though is Superman, a tool of the authoritarian government who wants Batman out of the picture. And as always, it's up to Bruce to find the perfect balance between law and order. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. I love when the superheroes are old though and still try to fight crime. Like I just picture my great grandfather like trying to kick like some thug who's like at his nursing home trying to take his shampoo. Just, yeah. That's what I imagine. And at 8, The Ray. Set on an Earth where Germany won World War II, it can make things pretty clear when you're talking about a dystopia. The Ray is a member of the resistance fighting against the German soldiers and is the primary protagonist of Freedom Fighters The Ray, which is an animated series set in the Arrowverse. The Ray in the crossover at least is shown to be quite powerful, being able to take down Red Tornado from what I can remember. This dude also has like a really cool suit and in the show is either married to or dating Captain Cold, which is sweet. He gained his powers after the original Ray died in front of him, and he was also included in the comic adaptation adaptation of the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, which was already adapted from the original comic event, but this one is based off the CW with Felicity and other people. However, the Ray was destroyed along with his Earth in the TV version of the crossover, but in the comics he was killed along with Felicity and Nyssa. This guy has some mad superpowers though, like super strength, flight, light energy blasts, light speed, invisibility, photokinesis allowing him to make solid light constructs, bioluminescence, and that's not even the whole list. Okay, it's freaking nuts, man. And at 7, Zombie Hulk. Marvel Zombies is probably one of the most accessible alternate futures in Marvel Comics, according to multiple people. And I don't think that we need much of an explanation here as to why Zombie Hulk would be scary powerful. Hulk is already a brute with anger issues, but this story takes place in an alternate version of the Marvel Universe called Earth 2149, where all superpowered beings became infected by an extraterrestrial virus which transformed them into zombies. So the Hulk, who already had a passion for smashing, is now hungry for human flesh. Do you see where I'm going with this? On the wiki, his abilities are listed as genius level intellect, superhuman strength, superhuman speed, master combatant, and cosmic powers from when he ate the Silver Surfer and Galactus. But his hobbies also include devouring living flesh, which sounds like the worst dating profile ever, or the best. They even have a section for crimes he's committed, like genocide, cannibalism, and more. I wish they had that section on Tinder. That'd make things interesting. And at 6, Injustice Flash. But what about a world where Superman was tricked into killing Lois Lane and his unborn son by the Joker who made him hallucinate fighting Doomsday, but then also nukes Metropolis? That's a thing that happened and it was absolutely brutal. So Superman ends up killing the Joker and then gets a taste for it, basically becoming a dictator of the world and then turning it into a dystopia where his word is law. Batman among others obviously fight it, but one of the superheroes who joins Superman is actually the Flash, who is still super fast, but now he works for a totalitarian regime. He does end up defecting, but let's be honest, he's more powerful when he's working with Superman because everyone ends up fearing him. He could shove a vibrating hand through your chest faster than you could say your own name. Just the thought of Superman having a speedster in his corner is enough to make your spine shiver. Halfway through and at number 5, Captain America 3099. Being used as a skin in the game Marvel Future Fight, Captain America 3099 is in essence Captain America, but make it RoboCop. He has a holographic shield that still actually works like a shield, but is probably one of the coolest and weirdest versions of Captain America I've ever seen. It looks really sweet, and I'd love to see someone cosplay this. Like maybe I'll be able to like grab a piece of like acrylic or something and make the shield myself, because like you can put the LEDs and stuff. It's dope. But he is after all the same old Captain America. So pretty powerful, but not as powerful as some other heroes. But I'm actually serious though, someone needs to make this shield. Whether it's the hacksmith or Odin makes or something, I'll make this shield, okay? I will happily do my best to get the rest of the costume together, because this is like my next goal. And at 4, Old Man Logan. The dystopia in Old Man Logan is about as screwed up as it gets. It was, after all, the inspiration behind the Logan movie, if you didn't already know. The original comic run of this story was all about Logan and a blind Hawkeye traveling across a country that had been completely conquered by supervillains. Those villains included the Abomination, Magneto, Dr. Doom, and Red Skull. The other villains that appear also include a venomized T-Rex. No, I'm not kidding. And the Hulk Gang, which is a whole other can of worms I don't really want to get into. Eventually though, Hulk and Logan have one final face-off, toe-to-toe, shot for shot, and Logan ends up decapitating the Hulk and then is on his way, finding a new sense of purpose, wanting to take the country back from the supervillains who took control, which is a noble yet probably lost cause, because let's be honest, would he really have won in that scenario? I don't think so. And at 3, Maestro. Speaking of the Hulk, Maestro from the Future Imperfect storyline is actually the version of Hulk present in the Old Man Logan series. First appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect #1 from 1992, Maestro possesses Bruce Banner's intelligence and the Hulk's more malevolent personality traits. After a devastating nuclear war destroyed most of the human race, the radiation from the war ended up basically supercharging the Hulk, turning him into an even more powerful version. He then ended up violently interacting with his cousin, She-Hulk, which resulted in the birth of the Hulk Gang. Yeah, I know I said I didn't want to get into it, but at this point I kind of have to explain this. This is absolutely terrifying because while Hulk is already a freaking monster, add more radiation, more power, and the destruction of a whole country, and Bruce Banner's intelligence, there's certainly something to be scared of. Not only that, but this was in 1992. They ran this story along with the whole Hulk Gang thing in 1992. Nobody would do this now, let alone 1992. That just seems like that's insane to me. Penultimately, and at number 2, Kingdom Come Superman. Yet another world where Lois Lane dies, except this time it's directly at the hands of the Joker, who had flooded the Daily Planet with his own toxin, killing everyone but Lois, who had managed to locate a gas mask. However, she tried to attack the Joker, but then Joker cracks her skull. Superman returns and Lois succumbs to her injuries and dies. As the Joker arrives for his trial though, he's killed by a new superhero called Magog. But then, Magog ends up being acquitted of his charges, which just makes Superman appalled, because, you know, the public is embracing a killer. But I mean, like, let's be honest, they do that anyway. Already disheartened by the death of Lois Lane, Kal-El abandons his life as Superman and retreats to the Fortress of Solitude, where he spends the next decade. Superman eventually returns to reform the Justice League with the goal of capturing heroes who followed Magog's example and took to killing, which results in many a battle and a nuke targeted towards metahuman genes. But in the end, Superman starts dating Wonder Woman and they end up expecting a child. Hopefully Joker doesn't make you think you're fighting Doomsday. Finally, in at number 1, Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan is considered the most powerful superhero in comics because he possesses basically unlimited powers. He debuted in the graphic novel limited series of Watchmen, published in 1986 and 1987, but Manhattan later on became a major player in the DC universe. He was revealed to be responsible for the Flashpoint event, which ended up creating the New 52 timeline in the process, something that removed 10 years of history of DC characters, and he did it on his own. So how could I not include Dr. Manhattan on this list when the Watchmen comic is very dystopian? The dystopia in Watchmen is caused by superheroes who thought that they could save the world but ended up leaving it hollow and broken. And Ozymandias makes another dystopia on top of that, thanks to him thinking that the only way to fix the world would be to destroy it. I still don't get this thought process, but I also totally get this thought process. Like, thinking that the world needs a reset, I understand, but actually trying to reset it is something else entirely.
At number 10, we've got Punisher 2099. In the future, Jake Gallows takes on the mantle of Punisher, and he makes for a pretty impressive version of the antihero. Being a former member of the Church of Thor, he takes on a role as a sort of bodyguard for hire, while also functioning as a police officer under President Doom's regime. He's driven by vengeance after his mother, brother, and sister-in-law are all killed by Kron Stone, and eventually ends the man's murderous streak himself, which is a pretty impressive demonstration of his power on its own. This futuristic Punisher shows some really advanced fighting skill as well, and gains even better stats after he's given a bionic arm. He's also able to blend in very well due to a face scrambler he uses to avoid detection. At number 9, we have Captain America 2099, and I'll be focusing on Roberta Mendez since there are a few versions of the hero in this storyline. This version of Captain America is created by Alchemax, a corporation in the future that forces Roberta to take the super soldier serum and gain her powers. Roberta's Captain America becomes the leader of Alchemax's Avengers and has virtually the same abilities as the present day's Cap, although she naturally doesn't have as much experience as Steve Rogers due to her younger age. She also can't control when she turns into Captain America, only making the switch when she hears trigger words such as assemble to turn into Cap and dismissed to turn back to Roberta. But despite her shortcomings, she's still a really competent Captain America and ranks as one of the more powerful heroes from the future. At number 8, we have Bishop. Bishop is introduced in the Days of Future Past storyline as a member of the X-Men. In this futuristic world, Sentinels have enslaved Earth, and Bishop along with the rest of the X-Men make it their task to fight back. Well, okay, it's not really the X-Men, it's actually called Xavier's Security Enforcers and is known to be a futuristic organization which is kind of a successor to the X-Men. Anyway, most of Bishop's influence comes when he travels back in time and uses his foresight of the grim future to try and alter his timeline and stop the Sentinels from taking over. He has the impressive ability to absorb any energy around him, including light, magic, or psionic energy, and charge up his own attack, as well as a healing factor and naturally extremely efficient time travel. Much like Punisher 2099, Bishop also has a bionic arm which heightens his fighting and strength abilities. At number 7 is Iron Lad. Nathaniel Richards is a very powerful younger iteration of Iron Man from Earth 6311, and one of the biggest discrepancies between his suit and that of Earth 616 Tony Stark's is that it allows him to travel through time. As the leader of the Young Avengers, Nate Richards isn't just some guy who gets his hand on an Iron Man suit, he's actually a teenage version of Kang the Conqueror, before his days as one of the most powerful villains in the game. Iron Lad has a pretty good power set
set as well with neurokinetic armor, which is made from a rare alloy from the 40th century. The armor actually listens to the wearer's subconscious thoughts and basically offers them superhuman abilities based on what they need in any given situation. Iron Lad also has a time-traveling spaceship, which is pretty dang cool on its own and offers its own form of power to the futuristic hero. At number 6 is Hulk 2099. This version of the giant green beast shows similar abilities to the Hulk we know from the present, but instead of Bruce Banner, the conduit of the Hulk persona in this timeline is John Eisenhart. Eisenhart is a studio executive who studies the story of the original 616 Hulk, who by John's era has been dead for some time. During a conflict with a group of Hulk worshippers called the Knights of Banner, John is caught in a gamma bomb explosion and turned into the Hulk himself. Just like the present day Hulk, his skin is bulletproof, he naturally has a huge increase of strength and Hulk form, but the most impressive advantage this Hulk has over the original is that he keeps his full intelligence and personality while turned. Not only that, but John can transform into the Hulk at will. As we all know, this offers a huge boost of power, basically taking out the main drawback for the present day Earth 616 Hulk. At number 5 we have Impulse. Bart Allen is the grandson of the original Flash, Barry Allen, and he inherits all of his super speed abilities. But this futuristic speedster faces a challenge that his grandfather never had to, which is a sped up metabolism. This ages Bart Allen at an extreme speed, making him age to 12 years old while only being 2 years old chronologically. Luckily, Bart travels back in time, a trend I'm noticing with these futuristic heroes, and teams up with his cousin Wally West to normalize his metabolism. He then takes up the mantle of Impulse due to his impulsive personality and carries on a similar power set to any of the other Speed Force conduits, with super speed, accelerated healing, and electrokinesis. But Bart has some powers unique to him as well, like a photographic memory, increased hand-to-hand combat, and mechanical aptitude. At number 4 I'm putting Batman Beyond. The only character on this list who was first introduced in his own animated series outside of the comics, Batman Beyond is one of the longtime favorites of many Batman fans. This version of Batman hails from a cyberpunk future where he is portrayed as a younger Batman predecessor wearing an extremely advanced batsuit that offers the wearer's superhuman abilities. He can see and hear through walls, has super strength, speed, and reflexes, and most impressively of all, Terry McGinnis's Batman can fly. Not glide, fly. But I'm sure you knew that already. With some fans online calling this Batman a mix between Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Batman, there's no question that this futuristic version of the hero we know and love deserves a spot on this list. At number 3 we have Spider-Man 2099. This version of Spider-Man is donned by Miguel O'Hara, who intentionally researches a way to turn himself into Spider-Man using technology and DNA enhancement. He succeeds and gains all the powers that present-day Spider-Man has, and more. This version of Spider-Man also gives himself a couple added bonuses of increased vision and hearing, as well as his signature talons and fangs that he gains through his genetic mutation. With these extra powers, there's no debating whether or not this futuristic version of the hero is more powerful than our present-day Spider-Man. When he gets stuck in the present day, Spider-Man 2099 becomes one of the most powerful and coolest looking, in my opinion, superheroes in the world. This is one of the most impressive futuristic heroes to come out of the 2099 storyline, and he's probably the one who's lasted the longest so far as well. At number 2 is Thor 2099. In the future, there is an entire religion based on the mythos of the superhero and god of thunder Thor. Similarly to the Hulk, who also has his own religion. I guess that's kind of a thing in the future. And Cecil McAdams is one of the priests at the Thorite Church who is chosen by the CEO of Alchemax to become one of the few people to be given the power of Thor himself. Not only this, but McAdams and the others who are part of this experiment are then brainwashed into thinking they're the real deal, making Cecil's drive and passion as the hero about as similar to the real thing as his powers are. But McAdams is the one out of all the test subjects who shines out of all of them and basically becomes a version of Thor that has the same power set as the modern day God of Thunder. And considering how powerful Thor is in the present day, there's no question that any hero from the future that carries the mantle would end up high on the list. At number 1, the final entry on our list is is the most well-known time-traveling hero of them all, Cable. This guy deserves the top spot on the list because he is one of the most high-powered time-traveling heroes in any comic. There are definitely some OP time-traveling villains out there, but this guy takes the cake for the good guys. Son of Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, and Jean Grey, Cable has greatness and power in his genes. Transported to the future when he was just a baby, Cable goes through a series of hardships in what is known to be a pretty bleak future, and returns to the present infected with a techno-organic virus. This virus turns him into a cyborg-like being that has increased strength on top of his already formidable telepathic and telekinetic abilities. With such a dynamic power set, and I didn't even touch on most of it to keep this video short, Cable is the perfect hero to have leading the charge for a better future. He is often in positions of leadership given his foresight into the future and his time-traveling abilities, and often leads some of the present day's most influential and powerful heroes into battle. He is usually seen as a prophet who takes on the impossible task of changing the outcome of the future for the better of humankind. And with everything he brings to the table, he has to be considered one of the most powerful and impressive superheroes to ever come from the future.